You're looking in the mirror, and the scale hasn't changed, but you feel heavier than ever. A silent, invisible enemy is wrapping itself around your organs. But this isn't about calories. It's about a chemical ghost haunting your body. And it all comes down to the hormone of panic, cortisol. This is where your body decides where to store the danger. It's 8 a.m. on day 16, and for Kai, the morning feels wrong. He feels puffy, a strange internal pressure that has nothing to do with the number on the scale. He pinches the fat on his stomach, the familiar soft layer just beneath the skin. That's subcutaneous fat, and it's not the problem today. The real issue is deeper, a tension he can't quite place. This feeling is orchestrated by an ancient survival program, a biological ghost we'll call the panic architect, cortisol. In the past, it was a hero, surging to give him the energy to fight a predator or flee a disaster. But today, the disaster is a stream of urgent work emails buzzing on his nightstand. Kai glances at his phone, and his shoulders instinctively tighten. Each notification is a tiny, almost imperceptible stress signal, a whisper to the panic architect that danger is near. Cortisol's job is to mobilize energy, flooding the bloodstream with glucose. But when the threat is a spreadsheet, there is no fight, no flight. All that mobilized energy has nowhere to go. The architect now faces a new problem: what to do with all this surplus fuel. You'll see exactly where it decides to build its emergency depot in just a moment.
At 10 a.m., Kai sits at his desk, a dull, pervasive ache radiating from his core. It's not a muscle cramp or a stomach ache. It's a dense feeling of fullness, as if something is crowding his insides. He discreetly loosens his belt by 1 notch, despite having only had coffee. This sensation is the physical manifestation of 2 very different biological storage systems. Think of your body as a city with 2 types of warehouses. The first is the subcutaneous warehouse, the fat you can pinch. It's located on the outskirts of the city, under the skin. It's relatively stable, well-organized, and designed for long-term storage. But the second, the visceral depot, is different. This is the secret, high-security, and highly flammable munitions dump built right in the city center, deep inside the abdominal cavity, wrapped around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines. The panic architect, cortisol, responding to the chronic, low-grade alarm from Kai's stressful morning, believes the city is under permanent siege. It needs an emergency fuel supply that can be accessed instantly. Kai takes another long sip of his black coffee, trying to cut through a persistent brain fog. He doesn't recognize this as another stress signal, another confirmation to the architect that the crisis is real and ongoing. So, the architect makes a strategic choice. It bypasses the safe suburban warehouses and begins diverting all incoming fuel shipments directly to the dangerous, centrally located Visceral depot, right next to the city's most critical infrastructure.
At noon, Kai finds himself standing before the office cafeteria, but he feels no desire for a balanced meal of protein and vegetables. Instead, a primal, undeniable craving for sugar has taken over his brain. A donut, a cookie, a can of soda, it feels less like a choice and more like a biological imperative. He looks at a vibrant salad, but his hand moves as if on its own, reaching for a large chocolate bar. This is not a failure of his willpower. It is a direct, calculated command issued by the panic architect. For hours, cortisol has been pumping glucose into his blood, preparing for a battle that never happened. In response, his pancreas released a wave of insulin to clear the excess sugar, causing his blood glucose to crash. His brain now perceives this crash as a catastrophic energy shortage. The architect, sensing this new emergency, screams for the fastest possible fuel source: pure sugar. It's a brilliant, vicious feedback loop. The stress response creates a sugar crash, and the sugar crash is interpreted as more stress. Kai unwraps the chocolate, feeling a wave of anticipated relief. As he eats it, the sugar provides a brief, euphoric rush. But this is exactly the moment the architect was waiting for. It uses the massive insulin spike caused by the candy bar as a key, unlocking the gates to the visceral depot and instructing the body to convert every last gram of that sugar into dangerous, inflammatory abdominal fat. It's the perfect trap.
By 3 p.m., the fleeting pleasure of the lunchtime chocolate bar has been replaced by a crushing, bone-deep fatigue. Kai is at his desk, head heavy in his hands, staring at the screen without comprehending the words. This isn't simple tiredness. It's a cellular-level energy deficit, the price paid for the earlier sugar spike. His brain, once again starved for glucose, sends out another desperate alarm. The panic architect, hearing this new cry of distress, assumes the siege is intensifying and doubles down, releasing another wave of cortisol. But here is the twist nobody tells you. His cells are now becoming deaf to the alarm. They are developing insulin resistance, refusing to take up the glucose from the blood. Kai rubs his eyes, trying to physically push away the mental fog. This is the paradox of chronic stress. His body is simultaneously flooded with a stress hormone, telling it to be on high alert, while his cells are unable to access the very energy that hormone is trying to provide. This puts the panic architect in an impossible position. With the cellular doors barred, all that circulating blood sugar has to be stored. There is only one priority now: get the excess fuel off the streets. The architect issues a system-wide directive, diverting all of it to the only facility still accepting emergency shipments, the rapidly expanding and increasingly volatile Visceral Depot. Stuck in traffic on the commute home at 6 p.m., Kai feels a profound sense of malaise. It's more than just mental exhaustion. His body feels inflamed. A subtle ache settles into his joints, and the feeling of being bloated and puffy is more intense than ever. He is irritable and short-tempered. This is not just in his head, it's a chemical reality. The Visceral Depot, the one built by the panic architect, is not a passive storage tank. It's a rogue, metabolically active organ. It has become a factory, churning out a constant stream of inflammatory molecules called cytokines. Kai grips the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turn white, frustrated by the gridlock. He doesn't realize the factory inside him is spewing chemical smoke throughout the city of his body. These cytokines are like propaganda agents, broadcasting messages of crisis and inflammation to every system.
They interfere with his brain, creating brain fog. They disrupt appetite signals, making him crave more of the very foods that fuel the factory. And they worsen the insulin resistance that started the problem, ensuring the factory has a constant supply of raw materials. That vague, unwell feeling is the physical evidence of a low-grade civil war, fueled by the very fat his body created to protect itself. Kai isn't broken. You aren't either. This is exactly how a healthy body reacts to a chronic, unrelenting stress signal.
At 7 p.m., Kai forces himself into the gym, driven by the idea that he can fight this feeling, that he can burn off the fat and stress with a grueling workout. He steps onto the treadmill, full of grim determination, but his body refuses to cooperate. He feels sluggish, weak, and profoundly unmotivated. His legs feel like lead. He glances at his heart rate monitor, annoyed that he can't get his numbers into the usual zone. This isn't just fatigue. It is physiological sabotage, orchestrated by cortisol. The panic architect views muscle tissue as a liability during a long siege. It's metabolically expensive. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. Its job is to break things down. In response to perceived danger, it begins to dismantle Kai's muscles, breaking down precious protein to convert it into more emergency glucose. So as Kai tries to run, his own hormonal system is actively working against him, dissolving his engines for scrap parts. To make matters worse, the intense cardio session itself is just another form of high-level stress. He grits his teeth and pushes the speed button, trying to outrun his frustration. He thinks he is waging war on his fat, but he is actually just sending a screaming confirmation to the panic architect that its worst fears are true. The body is indeed under a massive attack. In response, it will unleash even more cortisol post-workout, reinforcing the prime directive: store fat, break down muscle.
He's home by 9 p.m., collapsed on the couch in front of the television, hoping to finally unwind. But relaxation is impossible. He is trapped in a bizarre state of being physically exhausted, yet mentally wired. His mind races, replaying conversations from work, building anxious to-do lists for tomorrow. A restless energy thrums just beneath his skin. He picks up his phone and begins to scroll endlessly, a frantic search for a mental off switch that doesn't exist. This is the panic architect's final move of the day. Normally, cortisol levels should reach their lowest point in the evening, paving the way for melatonin, the hormone of sleep, to rise and prepare the body for rest. But Kai's chronic, day-long stress has broken this natural rhythm. His cortisol levels remain stubbornly high. The architect refuses to let the city's guards stand down. It interprets the desire for sleep as a dangerous vulnerability. Its elevated presence actively suppresses melatonin production. The evolutionary logic is sound. You don't fall into a deep, restorative sleep when you believe a predator is lurking just outside the cave. For Kai, the predator is a looming project deadline, but his ancient biology can't tell the difference. He is stuck on high alert, denied the very sleep that would reset the entire system.
At 3 a.m. in the pitch-black silence of his bedroom, Kai is violently ripped from a shallow, unsatisfying sleep. He jolts upright, his heart hammering against his ribs, a wave of inexplicable dread washing over him. For a few disoriented seconds, his mind races, searching for a threat that isn't there. He scans the dark room, his breathing shallow and rapid, his brain already cycling through a list of anxieties. This is not a product of a bad dream. It is a a predictable, physiological explosion. Throughout the day, his blood sugar has been on a chaotic roller coaster. Now, in the long hours without food, it has finally plummeted to a critical low. The panic architect, which is supposed to be dormant, detects this as a code red 5-alarm fire, a genuine survival emergency. It pulls the final panic cord, triggering the adrenal glands to flood his system with a massive surge of both cortisol and adrenaline. This chemical cocktail forces his liver to dump its emergency stores of glucose into the bloodstream. This powerful hormonal shock is what blasted him awake. It was a silent, chemical scream for energy that his conscious brain could only interpret as pure, unadulterated panic.
Lying awake in the aftermath, the adrenaline slowly ebbing. The silence of the early morning offers Kai a moment of unexpected, profound clarity. The racing heart, the internal pressure, the cravings, the exhaustion. He suddenly sees it all, not as a series of personal failings, but as a coherent, logical strategy. He takes a single, slow, deep breath, consciously relaxing his shoulders for the first time in what feels like days. He finally understands the motives of the panic architect. This entire complex and destructive system isn't a malfunction. It is an ancient and perfectly executed survival protocol. The architect is not an enemy. It is a hyper-vigilant guardian, doing its absolute best to protect him from what it perceives to be a relentless, life-threatening crisis. The visceral fat is its emergency fuel depot. The sugar cravings are its desperate search for quick-burn energy. The insomnia is the watchman it places on the wall. The problem isn't the guardian's strategy, it's the faulty intelligence it's receiving from his modern life. The constant pings, the deadlines, the traffic, they are all false signals of war. The insight lands with the force of a revelation. He doesn't need to declare war on his own body. He just needs to change the message.
As the first light of dawn filters into the room, Kai makes a conscious choice. He turns away from the nightstand, leaving his phone and its world of digital alarms untouched. He walks to the window, the dawn sky painting the world in soft colors. He presses his forehead against the cool glass, focusing on the simple physical sensation, anchoring himself in the quiet reality of the moment. He understands the new protocol. The solution isn't another punishing diet or a brutal workout. The solution is to change the signals. Today, he will become a master of his own intelligence network. Instead of coffee and emails, he'll start with a short walk in the morning sun, a direct signal to his brain to reset his body's master clock. He'll have a breakfast rich in protein and healthy fat to stabilize his blood sugar, telling the panic architect that the famine is over. He will turn off his phone notifications, silencing the false alarms. He's not trying to attack the visceral fat. He's peacefully decommissioning the factory by showing the manager that the war is over. But here is the looming threat. By calming the hypervigilant cortisol, he has created a vacuum. And now, a much older, more primal voice in his biology, the hunger hormone ghrelin, is about to wake up and start screaming. If you're one of the millions who gets that 3 a.m. jolt of anxiety, comment 3 a.m. Club below. We need to see how many of us are fighting the same invisible war.